Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support.
Yeah.
And so what was post-delivery like for the twins? How were they?
I don't remember.
That's okay. Adam, go for it.
Yeah, once they got cleaned up, they had two separate little things that they went into once they were cleaned up and everything. And
They went into their own little spots?
yeah, they're in the same room. They had their own little spots under the heat lamp and everything. They do all the tests and
Well, yeah, because they each have their own team, right?
Yeah, their own team. Yeah. So it's two kids, right? It's like, especially at that hospital, which is why we were directed to that hospital. They had that specialized team for multiples. So that was nice. At least during this pregnancy and delivery, I was able to be at the top near her face and be able to talk to her and tell her what progress was being made. And then I told her that they were both boys, which she had already figured out ahead of time.
That's right.
So, we already had names picked out. So she said, hey, quick hi to the boys. She couldn't hold them or anything, of course. And then they went over and got cleaned up. And then they were so small. Like
I do remember looking over and they were both wrapped up and he was holding them both like this with his shoulders up to it. I'm like, your arms are going to get tired.
I could hold them in my hands.
Right.
They're 4 pounds.
No, they were 5'2" and 5'6"
okay.
when they came out.
5 pounds.
Right.
5 pounds. Right. So they're just these little guys and like it's so fragile. Like
so
at least
tiny.
At least with Eric.
He was almost 7.
Yeah. He was like
right.
These guys were mini compared to him. It's only a 2 pound difference, but
when they're that small,
that's like
that's
40% of the weight, right?
Yeah.
It's less. So, once they got cleaned up and brought Ashley was in the recovery room, she's able to spend some time with them and hold them to her chest. It was about an hour later. And then we went back to our room when she was recovered enough. Mm-hmm. And then eventually.
Well, because they were born at 35 and 5, they had to do more sugar tests on them, I believe is what it was. And that's when we started seeing issues with Jake. So we tried nursing. We did, I did a lot of hand expression, trying to get the colostrum going, and it went really quick. Like I was very confident in my opportunity and experience to breastfeed. But they were just so little. Mm-hmm. It didn't take well, but I was damn determined and I was going to do whatever was needed. I was not going to only do breastfeeding because I was being stubborn. Right. If they told me that they needed to get some food into them, then give me the formula, no problems. Mm-hmm. But they were so tiny. They couldn't take a lot. They didn't even have the sucking mechanisms yet to do it. Mm-hmm. And we tried a lot. We did like the finger feed, we did the tube feed, we did bottles, we did breast, we did a lot. And also because they were so tiny, anytime they'd come to test their blood, it took forever to get enough blood out of their heels.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. Like I feel like Jake's heel was black from bruises and from pricks for a long time. And I think it was within 24 hours that they had said he needed more support. So then they took him to a NICU.
Okay.
And at Sunnybrook, the labor, I don't know if, or where you go after labor and delivery, I don't remember what it's called.
Right. Like the maternity ward.
Yeah. So the maternity ward is on a different floor than the NICU. So we had kind of decided that because I needed to go slow, even though I felt good, I needed to be mindful of having had a huge surgery, that Adam would be the one going to the NICU. And I would stay with Aiden. And we kind of just divided and conquered. And I don't really feel like it was a lot of conquering, but it's how we just had to figure it out.
The extra layer of that is, of course, that it's only the two of us allowed in the hospital. Okay, no visitors, nothing because of COVID. So
We weren't even allowed to leave.
yeah, so yeah, we couldn't leave the hospital for 5 days. So we ate hospital food for 5 days. Luckily, at Sunnybrook they have a food court, so they had 3 or 4 restaurants. We ate at each of those once or twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You know,
They took care of him because technically it was only supposed to be me getting meals as me being admitted. But
Right.
they always left a second tray for him. Like we felt we were very taken care of,
Good.
which was nice.
Yeah.
yeah, so with Ashley having to take it easy after her C-section and somebody having to stay with Aiden, we made the decision that I would always go down to the NICU and sit with Jake and bring whatever Jake needed, breast milk,
Whatever I could
whatever she
get
could
out.
provide, whatever she could spare from helping Aiden out, right? Because, of course, in the NICU, Jake's got the feeding tube through his nose, and he's got all these sensors and heart rate monitors. And
Was he doing the light therapy?
Light therapy. Sometimes I went down and he had the blindfold over his eyes, and just of course, by that point he was under 5 pounds.
Right.
So just squirming around in his what's it called?
Preemie diaper.
Preemie diaper.
Which was huge.
And like
Wow.
a heated area there, and
Yeah.
just being able to see him, I couldn't even take him out to touch him because he was all hooked up and everything, and he had to be under the heat therapy, under the heating lamp. So
Mhm.
just being there and him not even knowing I was there, just experiencing the whole situation. So
And what was that like for you, Adam? That like you couldn't pick him up and seeing him in such a vulnerable way. What was that like for you as a dad?
it was very difficult, especially being able to compare him to his brother, because Aiden at this point was doing pretty well. He was feeding successfully, and I almost felt like, why is only one of my kids thriving and the other guy's not in that as good of a situation? So I'm not someone to express my emotions very outwardly, but just watching him and saying, it's going to get better, buddy. It's got to get better. Good morning. How you doing? Just, just talking to him, because that's all I could really do. Just talk to him and let him know it's going to get better. And, we're doing everything we can to help you out. This is going to be tough, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get home at some point. And, he's going to get to see his big brother whenever that day came. We didn't know how long we were going to be there. It was, especially being there for 5 days, not being able to leave, being in the hospital, it was like kind of surreal, because this very, separated environment from the rest of the world that's going on.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it was like a prison, but it was like we're trapped in this spot until both our newborn boys are able to survive on their own, to be outside of these artificial environments and get into the real world. So it was almost like a moment in our lives that we just were completely separated and removed from the rest of, like I said, the rest of life. Right. And the fact that if this was our first pregnancy, and it would have been completely different, because there wouldn't have been the worry about we would have had still the dogs, but we had a toddler at home. We had a 2-year-old at home. He had just turned 2.
Yes.
He had never been away from us for any period of time. So he's at home with grandma for 5 days, and they're still living their life. And he's probably wondering, what is going on? Where are mom and dad? What's the deal? So that was another layer on top of having 2 kids at Sunnybrook, one in the NICU at this time, and just completely surreal.
I bet.
And I don't know if you noticed it, but the hospital honestly felt like a ghost town. Because no one was allowed any visitors, there was no one in the hallways.
Right.
Because you had to stay in your rooms. So when you did leave to go somewhere, it was scary.
Right.
Which made it a little bit eerie. Our side of the maternity ward, I don't feel like I saw another soul other than the nursing staff that came in now and again. So it was otherworldly. It was strange. And I think I just think that was a result of COVID, like being locked up, so to speak.
Absolutely. And what was that like for you, Ashley? Being, okay, we're dividing and conquering. So I'm with Aiden, but what was that like for you that then, you weren't seeing Jake as much?
Very hard, but in some weird way, I didn't also think about it a lot. I had another baby in my arms that needed me just as much. I know I would ask Adam all the time he came back. I'd grill him on like 20 questions. And how did he look? What does that mean? What does that mean? What were they doing? And why did they do that? And all the questions I wanted to ask, but was far too scared to go see for myself. I'd often try and get him to describe to me what he looked like. I'd want to see pictures so that I could kind of understand what was going on and what it would look like. I needed to prepare myself before I went down myself because I didn't want to go in almost blindly. That doesn't go well for me usually emotionally, especially because I knew I had just had babies and my emotions wouldn't be normal anyways. And I think thinking of it now, I almost can't believe that I didn't think of him more. I think I felt almost totally comfortable that you were doing that part and that I could worry about the one in my arms.
And looking back with compassion on that experience, does it feel like, and that's how we survived? Like that's what needed to be done?
That's what needed to be done because if Ashley didn't take care of Aiden in a certain way,
then
in a very good way, then he would
we could have been there too.
He could have been in the NICU as well for the same period of 5 days. Or more. Things can go a different direction at any moment. So we were just putting as much energy into Aiden, which we had full-time care of with us in the room at the hospital. We were just, I don't want to say we were directing more resources and more of ourselves towards Aiden because he was with us full time.
No, because we weren't. I sent you. It's weird. Yeah. I sent him away often.
Yeah.
I would do everything I could to get everything I could out of my body, and I would give to Adam to take to Jake.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'd come back. I'm like, that was only 20 minutes. Why are you here? And he's like, well, he's sleeping. And I'm like, but can't you talk to someone? Like, be there. And because I was going through the same thing, except the baby I had with me was asleep on me, but I don't think that was the option wasn't there for that all the time with Jake, because he was my baby, is my baby who wasn't with me. Yeah. But I knew he was okay.
Yeah, absolutely. He was in the best place, like, to be taken care of, and they were doing what they needed to do to get his strength up and get his weight up, and
exactly. And I had a partner who could go. Yeah. Right. It's not like I was trying to do it by myself. At that point, I don't know what we would have done.
Right. And so then also, like you guys said, right, Eric's at home. So you said it was hard, right? Like, Eric's at home. So you're dealing with everything that happened, twins, and also thinking, like, part of you is at home, like part of your brain, I'm sure, and your heart was at home.
100%. And we had decided with my mom before we left that we weren't going to FaceTime with Eric because he was only 2. He wouldn't get it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to have her dealing with him being upset that mommy and daddy weren't there, because we figured, he's 2. He's not going to miss what he doesn't see. So we didn't want to put ourselves in front of him, but not be there, sort of thing. And he had spent a lot of time with my mom. He's super comfortable with my mom, and she came here. So he was in his home, which was best. So again, also, honestly, did not cross my mind probably as much as it should have, but only because I knew he was okay.
Absolutely. And should, I like to say this all the time, should is a shame word, right? It's not like should for who. It's what worked for you guys and your family. It's what you all needed to do to get through, right? And there's no one here saying, yeah, you should have thought of it more, or you should have done this, or you should have done that. No, it's what works for your family, right?
Mhm.
What you needed to do. And so you were there for 5 days. Was everyone discharged after 5 days?
No.
No. Okay.
So technically Aiden was discharged and like probably by a hair was discharged. They had told us a number of times that even if Aiden had technically met the discharge criteria, because they were considered 35 weekers, we were likely staying there for 5 days regardless, just in order to monitor more. Because I guess they recognize that things can change pretty quickly. And when the baby's that tiny, it's like more likely.
Right.
So Aiden was technically discharged. We had asked, I guess it was us that initiated that question. We had asked if Jake could get moved closer because we're living in Bradford and we were down at Sunnybrook. So it would not have been a quick commute if we had wanted to spend time with him each day, especially not knowing how long he'd continue to be in a NICU.
Yep.
So we had asked for a transfer to South Lake at that point, and unfortunately, they did not have space.
Oh, wow.
So the next closest spot that had space was RVH up in Barrie.
Yep.
Which, although not probably from a distance from a kilometer standpoint, would not have been closer. It was one highway, so it was quicker from a time standpoint.
Right. Okay.
So I think it was that day on the fifth day, we came home with Aiden and had made arrangements for them to notify us when they were preparing Jake to be transferred. And did you go down to Sunnybrook and follow them, or did you just meet them? I don't even remember.
No, so Aiden, Ashley, and I got discharged from the hospital, and then the transfer of Jake up to Barrie, up to RVH, was to be done later in the evening. So we were discharged at noon or something like that. And then Jake's transfer via ambulance was going to be at 8 o'clock that night. So I asked if I could stay behind and go up with him to Barrie, or at least meet them along the highway and follow them up to Barrie at that point. But that wasn't something they were able to organize. So I was just told to meet them up at Barrie at a certain time. I wasn't familiar with that hospital. We've never been there before, and I'm not sure the ambulance had ever been there either. It was a transfer from Toronto to Barrie. So they didn't tell me what entrance it was going to be at or anything like that. There's multiple entrances to the hospital.
And this is all technically when it's closed, right?
Yeah.
It's at like 8 or 9 p.m.
Yeah, no visitors during that time. So I'm trying to get in through the front security at the hospital and saying, where am I supposed to go? What's going on? Nobody knows what's going on. And it turns out he'd already been there for a little bit of time, already up in their NICU. So he's up there by himself. Not that.
Well, not by himself.
Well,
not with Dad.
Not with Dad. So we didn't know where he was. And I didn't want to be going in blind the next day because I wanted to see where he was going to be. It's just a parental thing, right? Just where's my kid? Where's everybody sleeping?
Yep.
You know?
Is everyone safe?
Where are they at?
Yeah.
So eventually I was able to get through. They called the security called the NICU, and I was able to go up there after hours and just see where Jake was going to be staying and be situated and what the setup was. And once I saw that, I was happy, and I went home.
All right, and I don't mean to interrupt, but like you got to remember too, when babies are born, they get given mom's name, right? So then he was Jake Harridge, but he's Metzler. So then he was when he would say, "Well, I'm at a Metzler, I'm looking for my son." They don't connect them.
Yeah,
which was just another complicated layer.
Right. Of course.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a trial.
And then you've got me at home with a newborn and as a 2-year-old being like, did you find them? What's taking so long? Like a little bit of anxiety starting to kick in with the transfer. And I was like hyper vigilant of how are they transferring him? Like, is the vehicle safe? Like I knew it was an ambulance, but like you don't often move a lot of kids via ambulance. I'm like, what does that look like? Did you get a chance to see him in there? Was someone back there with him? Like a lot of, again, the stuff I can't control, which had he been home with me, I could control, was starting to really ramp up in my brain.
Right. And does that kind of relate to you both weren't his primary caregiver? What was that like?
Can't say I thought about it.
I think I felt a little more connected to that than Ashley did during the
Mhm.
time that Jake was up in Barrie, which was
100%.
7 days. He was up there for
Okay.
7 days, so he was in NICU for a total of 12 days.
Okay.
So every day I would go up there because luckily I'd taken vacation of 2 weeks, so 12 days off in a row would be tough for anybody. But
Yeah.
given the vacation I had taken, it worked out. So I went up every single day.
I pumped all night, sent him with a pile of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So every day I went up with fresh milk for Jake to put into his feeding tube because he was still in the feeding tube the whole time he was there up until the last day.
Wow.
So, on top of what we provided to him from home, we also had the formula there, and he had good care. I was very happy with the NICU at Barrie.
You spent most of the day up there. I feel
Yeah,
like he'd go up for at least 4 hours at a time.
Yeah.
So if you're going to drive an hour, you might as well stay.
Yeah. And
Right.
at that point, he still had the feeding tube, but I could at least take him out of where he was sleeping, and he had lots of blankets, and I could tell he was getting better.
Yeah.
Which was
Color was improving,
Yeah.
even in pictures I could see.
which was very heartening, and it was nice to see him getting closer to looking like his brother, like Aiden.
Yeah.
As far as weight wise goes, and also color, mannerisms, it was nice to see. So I did a lot of driving, a lot of kilometers on the vehicle, but it was well worth it. And there could have been a couple days where we didn't go, but the fact that we wanted each day to give fresh milk and support.
It never even crossed our mind that you wouldn't go.
No,
Not once.
every day.
Right.
Like my mom came every day to be able to help with the other two kids, to help with me. It never even crossed my mind that he wouldn't go.
Yeah.
Not once.
So I got told to take a lot of pictures, which I did, and tell him that mommy loves him and everything. So
He even brought up one of Eric's toys one day and put it in with him. And then I think that was the first, when you showed me that picture, was the first time not the first time, but I really realized how tiny they were.
Right.
I remember taking a picture of Aiden. We had brought with us, because we didn't know what things would be available at Sunnybrook with COVID. We had brought a 6-pack of the 1.5 liter bottles of water.
Mhm.
And I remember putting that beside him and took a picture, and he was smaller
Right.
than the 1.5 liter water bottle.
Yeah.
And so when he brought the little action figure up with him and put it beside him, I'm like, holy smokes.
Yeah. He's little.
Tiny. Like they were swimming in preemie outfits for about a month
Wow.
before they started to come close to fitting.
Right.
That was, I think, one of the hardest parts I have. I can tell you how much they weigh for, I think, every single day of their life for the first 5 months.
Right.
Like we were so on top of tracking their measurements and their growth to make sure we weren't getting behind, and to make sure that they were growing, that we bought a scale. Like I had my sister order a scale for me and use their Amazon Prime so that it would be there by the time we got home on the day we were discharged.
Mhm.
Like I wasn't messing around. It was immediately having one in the NICU and having the other guy so small that he barely fit his car seat. It was immediately into, what am I doing to beef these kids up? Not a thing else matters right now. I think I was running on, once they were both home, I was going on 3 hours or less of sleep for about 12 weeks per day, because it was clockworks. Every 3 hours they were feeding, and I was pumping after because they weren't breastfeeding yet, but I was determined to try, which meant I had to keep my supply going. So they were getting bottles, they were getting breast milk and formula, and I was pumping every feed. It was nonstop, because with 2 of them as well, it's start 1, finish 1, start 2, finish 2, close your eyes for an hour, and you start again. And I knew from our first experience with pregnancy and with having our first child that he doesn't work well on little sleep, and one of us has to be pleasant. So I almost never woke him up for nights. When he worked nights, my mom would come and stay a couple of times. just so that it would be faster.
Right.
It still only gained me like 30 or 40 minutes extra sleep. So when she started to really suffer with how often we were waking up, I told her to stop coming too.
Oh.
My coffee addiction became very real at that point, but I didn't think about it. I just did it. I didn't.
At
I
that
remember
point, you're in it.
100%. I remember a few times waking up and I would sway. My body was just so exhausted, but it was suck it up, buttercup. These babies need you. Nothing else matters, which probably isn't ideal, but it's what I needed to do. It's what my mind and my body said I needed to do for my babies. And so I did it.
Right.
So, yes, on top of all that, while Jake was in Barrie, we did our first like well check with our family doctor.
Yeah.
I think it was either day 1 or day 2 home. It was in the first 48 hours, I guess. And the doctor thought he looked a little yellow.
Mm.
And he wanted us to get checked out by the hospital. So at 10 days old, after having had a C-section, I took my baby to the emergency room during COVID.
Oh, gosh.
Where we saw a pediatrician from South Lake who agreed he needed to be admitted. So Adam stayed with Eric. My mom was here, though, because she packed up some stuff and dropped it off to me at the hospital. But like I had parked, taken out a stroller, loaded a kid to all 10 days post C-section, walked probably far too far to the hospital, was admitted, didn't sleep there. Mind you, that bed was much more comfortable than any of the other ones. But there was no space at their NICU. So he was actually admitted to the pediatric ward.
Okay.
But again, it was fine. I remember having one hell of a cry, sitting there watching him under the lights, but then came in with the good chuckle. He mentioned, I was talking to him later that night and he said, well, he can't let his little bro be the only guy getting superpowers under those lights.
Right.
So
Ever the
kind of helped. Yeah, it puts it into perspective. But yeah, he was getting light therapy. We were only there for about 24 hours. And it seemed to have done enough. It got the bilirubin levels back to where they should be. Because he had technically cleared those tests when we left Sunnybrook. And so, yeah, we were there for about 24 hours and then had the nicest pediatrician. She had called me the day after. She was the one who had admitted us. And I was in tears at that point, obviously quite emotional. And, she said she wanted to check in on me because she knew how complicated everything was with everyone. At that point, this was our 3rd hospital, 2 kids in a hospital, 1 kid at home.
Yeah.
Everybody was somewhere else. So she called to follow up, see how I was doing,
Right.
and also how Aiden was doing. And then we had to do follow-ups back at the peds unit every couple days just to make sure the weight was going up like they wanted it to. And it wasn't initially, it did take a while, but eventually they did get it. They just seemed to all of a sudden really get it a few weeks in and kind of haven't looked back since at all.
And so it sounds too like a lot of juggling.
100%.
Yeah, like so, right? It's like, okay, who's with Eric and who's with Aiden, who's with Jake, and like, oh, Aiden's not feeling good, and like, oh, now he's in hospital, and like, who's with who, and
I think it was just a warm-up.
Yeah.
That was a warm-up to having twins and a toddler.
Right.
Life is still very much like that.
Right.
So-and-so is sick. Can you get them from this daycare? Oh, I can't get the time off. Can you pick those 2 up? Her life is very scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of people on call at all times.
Yep.
He's never taken more sick time in his life.
Yep. And I feel
and
like
it's not for him.
Exactly. And I feel like we don't, fully get how hard it is juggling like family and work and sick days and sick time and childcare and like all the things. It's like, oh yeah, so I've never used a sick day for myself since having a child. And like what's that like? It's a lot. It's a lot to say the least.
Yeah. And in my job, if I'm not there, I still have to prepare for not being there.
Right.
Whereas his job, if he's not there, he's just not there. He doesn't have to prepare to not be there or recover from it, so to speak.
Right.
I don't get that luxury. So I try really hard to not have to be the one to be home, just because it makes my job so much harder. But at the same time, my babies are sick. I want to be home.
Yeah. And I'm sure you don't have an infinite number of sick days, Adam.
Oh,
No, well,
he's already capped them for the
yeah,
calendar year.
yeah, family sick. But yeah, on top of that, so Jake was in NICU for a total of 12 days. After the 7 days, when he was getting discharged from Barrie, RVH, Ashley and Aiden actually came with me to bring Jake home for the first time after 12 days, right? 12 days of being alive. All of a sudden, that's the day he comes back to his house, right? So that was a big day. My parents were there.
Well, especially because like Jake was taken from Aiden, so to speak, 24 hours after. Yes. Right? He hadn't seen him, been close to him, even. I think I brought Aiden with me only once down to the NICU. We went to, like, the three of us went together. Mm-hmm. And so they would have been in proximity to each other once in almost 2 weeks.
Right.
And so we made sure that we all went. We all went for pickup. It was a must.
So yeah, we all went. My parents were here. So Eric was napping upstairs. And after his nap, came home. He knew he had one brother, but he didn't know about the second one because we didn't tell him.
Well, so he didn't get it.
He didn't. Yeah, he was two, right? So
out of sight, out of mind.
So everyone's down here in the living room, and he walks down the stairs with my mom. With his grandma, and he looks over, he sees the brother he knows about, and he looks over to either my mom or dad, whoever's holding the other kid. He did a double take. Like, what?
And then he fell on the floor.
Then he fell on the floor. Oh, no.
Oh, and we have it all on video.
One. So he knew he had one brother. All of a sudden he has two.
Wow.
He wouldn't understand anyways. Seeing is believing for a toddler, right? So once he saw it, he believed it. That's how he reacted. So it was quite comical, to be honest.
That's hilarious.
It was a good culmination of a very hectic 12 days, and it's never actually stopped since then. But
no, it's still really hectic.
That was quite something. Like you said,
it was almost like Eric somehow subconsciously knew we needed a laugh to all of a sudden take a breath.
Yeah.
And watching the video is just hilarious. Every time it's hilarious.
Yeah. Kids are pretty amazing for that.
Yeah.
And so what was that like, having the whole family home?
For me, it just felt like more work, which it really was. But like I had said, like my brain was literally in, how am I going to do the best I can for all these people? Mm. And I went into work mode.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a massive schedule. Like, well, Jake was up in Barrie at RVH. Ashley was only responsible for feeding one child physically in person, but she had to provide for another child. But at least there's not someone attached to you at that point, right?
Having one and a toddler would have been a cakewalk.
Yeah,
that was no problem those few days.
For me, having everyone at home once Jake actually got here, it was like this is what we wanted
to be.
This is how it's going to be. Let's get down to business and do what we got to do. Let's just face reality and roll with the punches. I know those are cliched statements, but that's the truth. It's like, this is how it's going to be. Let's do it.
We definitely both smiled a lot more. Our shoulders definitely relaxed a bit once he was finally here.
Yeah.
It was a big sigh of relief that everyone was finally here. And I remember Adam saying a number of times that when we were leaving Sunnybrook, he had a lot of anxiety around leaving with empty car seats, something going wrong, like the bottom falling out. And so when we did leave with one empty car seat, because Jake was going to another hospital, it was challenging emotionally. And then so coming home with both boys from Barrie, having them both in the van, which we never thought we'd have to buy. And looking back and seeing both faces, again, so tiny in the car seats. It wasn't intimidating in the way that I think it could have been because they were tiny. It was, this is right. This is what it's supposed to be. This is
Right.
not a whole lot's going to stop us now.
Adam, can I ask you what's coming up for you?
What's coming up?
Yeah, like emotionally?
Well, yeah, I didn't remember I'd actually said that about the empty car seats. So the fact, actually, at that point, we had 3 car seats in the back, but only 2 were filled because Eric was sleeping.
Yeah.
The first time we had
but Eric, I was saying it was the infant car seats.
The infant car seats, yeah.
Because they had been brought into the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was very. I really enjoyed that a lot. It was sort of a relief, as Ashley said earlier. Like our shoulders were not as tense. Just felt loose, right? It's like this is the start of something that we've been thinking about for a long time, and also the end of this 12-day ordeal that we didn't foresee ever being something we'd have to deal with. Like,
yeah,
right.
But I
think the car seat thing though too, don't mean to cut you off, but like it was one of those things like in hockey, you don't talk about the damn shutout till the game is over. So you don't voice the fear because it'll come true. So he never said it until we were leaving with 1 car seat empty. And he said, like, this was a fear of mine. But at that point, I got to step in and say, but he's where he needs to be. Like, he's getting what he needs to get. Everything was very literal for me. Like I wasn't as emotional as I expected to be because there was so much work to do.
You were very logic minded.
Which is not like me at all.
That's more my thing.
That's 100% his thing. But that might have been where things between us work in that way. Like he all of a sudden flips to being the more compassionate, emotional person. And my immediate response was be that logic for him, balance it out. Like it's what it needs to be.
Right.
And we also knew that it wasn't, I guess, like the challenges we were facing in the NICU weren't astronomical. They were very minor from a NICU standpoint, which doesn't negate the fact that we were there and that it was stressful. But from a comparison standpoint, it was easy. There wasn't a lot of complications to it. He just needed to grow.
I'm curious to know, what was the impact, looking back, hindsight's 2020, on your mental health? Now that you're not in, you're in survival mode in a different way.
So hold on.
Yeah. But in that, like, physically vulnerable, you actually, having delivered the twins and then, Jake being in the NICU and those physical vulnerabilities. But looking back on all that, how did that contribute to your mental health, do you think?
I think the first few months that were so much survival, I'm not even sure I've still processed a lot of it. I don't know if the NICU experience kind of messed my head up or the twin part messed my head up.
Or a combination of both?
Or I really couldn't tell you, because I know a lot of my anxiety that did start to creep up was probably more at the 3 or 4 month mark when you were back to work more regularly and the twins had reached a point that they were a little bit more on the average side now, like still a month behind. They were still legitimately preemies, but we were really out of the super scary part. They had gained enough weight that they didn't look so skeleton-like, and they were growing well. Now my anxiety around control, and not necessarily needing to control everything, but looking to optimize everything, like wanting to make sure that, okay, if I'm feeding them at the same time so that they'll sleep at the same time. And holy crap, what do I do if they both wake up and I'm by myself? And then Eric wakes up and I've got all 3 of them awake, needing me and screaming, what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's when I was having a lot more issues and obviously being massively sleep deprived at this point. Like I said, I was probably going on 3 hours a night.
Right.
Still.
For 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember that being a really tough part for my mom because she didn't know what to do. And I still experience a lot of anxiety around sleep. For them, just again, trying to optimize their growth and making sure they get what they need. And then once things got busier because the kids were getting bigger, I had a whole different type or experience with anxiety. I didn't enjoy being home with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I still hate myself for saying that out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I didn't love my kids. I love them to bits.
Mm-hmm.
Having two of them home at the same time, and like Eric was in daycare part-time.
Mm-hmm.
On days that I was home alone with the twins, just the two of them, not three, when I had only the two of them, the need for me to be everything for two people was so high that I constantly felt like I wasn't doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, having the two of them home alone still kind of sets me off, triggers a lot of inadequacies that I think are just in my head. But I would much rather be home with three. I don't know why I think maybe part of seeing Eric do so well makes me, having him home kind of balances out the inadequacy. Like, look, no, you did do it. Like, he's great. And the twins are doing great too, but I don't know, there's a lot there.
Is there like a part of you that feels like you can't cope if at the beginning it was like, what if they wake up at the same time, or what if they're fussing at the same time, or they need me at the same time? Was it like, and you won't be able to cope with that?
Yeah. And then funny enough, it sort of did happen one night, but more recently, as I came to get to know the twins, as they became a little bit more their own person, I learned very quickly that when it comes to comforting Jake, if you are physical with your comfort, he doesn't want it to stop. So that was also very challenging, because then if he was having a really off night, which didn't happen often, it really didn't. I'm very lucky in that all three kids were and are quite good with sleep. But if Jake was having a rough night, and I always used like a timer on myself to try and make sure that if I said I was going to give him 5 minutes, then I really gave him 5 minutes, like, because it always feels like so much longer.
Yeah, for sure.
If I ended up deciding, okay, he's quieted down, and then it ramps up again, I'm like, okay, this time I'll give him 7. We'll see what happens. And if he settles down, then I'm not going in. But if he doesn't settle down, it's like he could smell I was there, and it got bigger. The freak out got bigger, and you've got to remember too, there's another baby in that room. And so you quickly want to pick him up to hush him and to settle him so he doesn't wake up the brother, so he doesn't wake up Aiden. But Jake needed physical comfort and liked physical comfort. And so when he did settle, and settle enough that you could put him down, the second you started to, it happened all over again.
Right.
So I think one night I brought him into our room, or you went in there to try and settle him, because I just couldn't. I almost had refused to be the one to pick him up, thinking maybe it was something to do with me being the mom. Maybe he could smell the breast milk or something, and he wanted to just stay there. So that's also something that when I really think about it, kind of bugs me, that I kind of almost withheld some of the physical comforting at night when he needed it. Not that it happened often. I think had it been a more frequent thing, then I would have completely did it a different way. But I remember one night, and I think you were home. I think you were sleeping between work. So I wouldn't dare wake him up. I would never do that. But Jake was just having one of those off nights. So I went and I picked him up. I actually brought him to our room because then at least if I held him, then he was okay. And then at this point, Eric's in a big boy bed. And he got up and he came in my room. And I said, okay, well, I'm not getting a toddler and a baby in here. Jake was probably 8 months old now. Yeah. And so I said, okay, well, let's try going back to your bed, Eric. So I brought Jake into Eric's bed. And I couldn't figure that out. So then I was like, I'm sorry, Jake, because at least I knew he was okay and he was contained if he was in a crib. So I went and I put him back in the crib, even though he cried. And then I laid with Eric and Eric went back to sleep. And eventually Jake went back to sleep. And then at some point I went back to sleep. Yeah. But it was kind of like, in a weird way, that moment was a little bit like, oh, look at that. You got through it. Yeah. And that portion of my anxiety has been a little bit more settled almost since, which is good. I did also do like a therapy course online to try and help figure my own shit out. It was helpful in some aspects. And then I'm more of a talker. I have a girlfriend I talk to a lot who's gone through a lot of similar, we can connect on a lot of wish we couldn't connect on levels. I wish neither of us had those experiences, but.
Right. And, I think all of that just speaks to, like you said, being needed so much. That's really hard. And it's okay for us not to love the work of parenting. Sometimes we feel like I don't love my kid, or we don't, not I feel like sometimes we don't love our kids, or sometimes we don't have that connection when they're first born. Like that's actually pretty common. Right. Those are really normal experiences, but we don't talk about them enough to normalize, right? Yeah. And so then when we don't feel that connection, or we feel tired and burnt out and touched out and like, I don't want to deal with my kids. I don't want to be alone with them, or I don't want whatever. There's like guilt and shame that's just like built in there from all these messages that like, you're a mom, you're supposed to love having kids and changing 100 diapers a day and, all the things. No.
The diaper comment makes me laugh because I remember driving Eric to daycare one day and it was garbage day and there was other families in the neighborhood with babies. So you see all their diaper genie sleeves out and we counted. Most families had about 4.
Right.
We had 16.
Oh boy.
Because Eric was still in diapers. He was only 2.
Right.
So we had 3 in diapers.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. I had 2 in diapers and that was enough. And that's the thing that's also really common, when you talk about, it was kind of like at the 3-month mark where I was noticing my anxiety more. That's also pretty normal because you're, like you said, okay, you're not as, fearful or worried because they were like coming out of the woods, so to speak. They were growing, they were gaining weight, hitting their milestones, that kind of stuff. So it's like, then your nervous system is like, oh, I have a bit of room here. I'm not constantly on high alert that they're like, in a life or death situation, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a bit more breathing room. So then your nervous system and your brain and your body catch up and are like, oh, so let's freak out now.
Let's fill it with some more scary stuff.
Yeah, because now we can freak out.
Yeah,
right?
that's so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So that's actually really common, like, for people to even have these symptoms of, I'm not diagnosing you or anything, but like people having symptoms, for example, of anxiety or postpartum depression or any of those issues, even well past a year, right? Mm-hmm. You're in that survival mode, right? For so long.
For sure.
And so I'm curious, Adam, again, hindsight is 20/20, but what do you feel like the fertility journey and having twins and having a twin in the NICU, and how has that impacted your mental health?
Well, right now, and it's changing very soon. I'm getting a job where I'll be working straight days, Monday to Friday. Okay. But I've been on shift work for 11 years. And the first 7 or 8 years of me doing that, it was fine. It was just the two of us. It was, you know, we each had our alone time because, you know, she would work Monday to Friday, 7 to 3, and then I'd work rotating shifts. Sometimes we'd be working weekends, so she'd have the host all to herself. She can go and do whatever she wants because I'm at work. And then all of a sudden, it just didn't work anymore. So during all of this, where she's getting up in the middle of the night and I'm not even in the house, I felt very guilty because she's having to handle all of the stress, all of this baby stuff, and all by herself, and she has no one to lean on physically.
No one could come over.
No one could come over. I was at work. I work 40 minutes away. I can't just leave in the middle of the night because I work sometimes 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And in the line of work I'm in, I need to be there. I can't just leave on a whim. So I felt very guilty. So I've been trying to get a day job for probably since the twins were born, just to be able to help out and be able to physically be here when we're all busy at the same time. And now it's come to fruition. The twins are almost 2 and Eric's almost 4. So it's like, it's going to get a lot more busy, but I feel very guilty that I missed a lot of the very stressful times for Ashley, and I could do nothing about it. It's just the nature of the line of work I'm in.
Yeah, but like we both know and knew coming into parenthood that I'm the baby one. I love them. Like I knew I could take it on, and we knew you were more of a 3 and up. Never had little ones around him, didn't know what to do with them. We knew that. So like even when I had people encouraging me, well, why don't you get Adam to do it? I'm like, because it's not his thing. I would say we were very well informed of our strengths at that point. So it didn't faze me to ask for any help from him with things to do with babies. Take Eric away for an hour, be my guest, because he was older. Yeah. You know what to do with them. No problem. Leave me the babies. I got it. It's not an issue. Was it perfect? Heck no, because I was outnumbered no matter what. But we knew that this was also just going to be like a part of what we were doing. We got to get through this portion. And I chuckle a bit because I saw Michelle Obama on a talk show recently where she was talking about it's not until you have kids where you start kind of counting against your partner, being like, well, I did 6 diapers last night. How many did you do? And I was like that a bit. I was like, well, the diaper part, you don't need to be good with babies for. You just have to know how to do it. And that's what he would do. When it came to the feeding and the soothing and that was all me. And I was okay with it. I think from what you've told me is he was sad to be missing out on things. That was what bugged you, because you're also very aware that I also don't let go of things very easily. Being a control person, things have to be done a particular way. Right. And so you might as well just let me do it because I'm going to go redo what you did anyways. So he knows when to step in, even though other people might not see it or understand it. And I know we talked about that. Probably, was it in September on our wedding anniversary, we had kind of talked about no one really understands our dynamic like we do. And everyone expects families to function in the same way when nothing about our family matches any of our friends, other than we all have boys. Right. No one else has twins. No one else has a partner that works shifts. There's nothing else that's the same. So expecting our families to function in any way that matches anyone else is unfair.
And have you had any friends, Adam, who were the ones that went to paid work that expressed like feeling guilty or feeling sad for missing out? Anyone you know ever like share that with you?
Not really, no. People I've worked with, they're generally single people because it's shift work. It's tough. It's again, I felt very guilty. I feel very selfish sometimes because people, like, if we have a social engagement, I sometimes can't make it because I'm working on a shift. And it's completely opposite to the lifestyle that people that work Monday to Friday, 7 to 3 or 9 to 5 or whatever it might be. Because I'm working some weekends, I'm working overnight, and it's just not compatible with a lot of other people that we're friends with.
Well, and given, I don't mean to cut you off, but like, given the kid situation in terms of being outnumbered now, depending on what we've been invited to or where we've been invited, if he's working, I can't go because I don't feel comfortable taking 3 kids somewhere by myself. There's only certain houses I would go to like that, knowing I have support and friends, or knowing that they also have young kids, so I don't have to be so anxious about, don't go down those stairs, don't put that in your mouth.
For sure.
So his shift work schedule really impacts our access to socialization right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. But yeah, the people that work that do have children, the children are older. So they started a shift work, they left to go to a day job, and then if they felt comfortable, they went back to shift work afterwards.
Right.
And I said this to my coworkers many times: shift work works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
It could be a snap of a finger having a child, because, like I said, I'm offloading a lot of my parental responsibility onto Ashley. On my 4 days I'm working, I'm completely absent for the most part from the parenting role, and then on my 4 days off, I'm fully engaged. I'm there, but sometimes you can't compartmentalize the issues or the problems we're going to have with our kids, or when they're going to have a tantrum or go to the hospital or something. You can't say that's only going to happen in the 4 days where I'm around.
Exactly.
So we've had to rely a lot on Ashley's mom, which she's been mentioned many times in the story, and she is a big part of the story. And if she's not available, then it goes on to fully Ashley. If she's having to look after 3 little ones, I'm physically not here. Like I said, I felt very guilty, very selfish, because I'm sort of prioritizing myself and my sleep over the 4 other members of my family. But
we know you have to.
Yeah, so it was something we knew ahead of time. But having, like I said, twins and then also having a toddler, that's not something we really foresaw ahead of time, because how can you?
Yeah, exactly.
And having not known anybody else who had twins, especially that close to a toddler, having 3 kids that close in age and being that young, it was eye-opening for us, and also trailblazing, because what else do we have to compare to?
Exactly.
Like Ashley said, we can't, our story doesn't match up with anyone else we know.
Right. And you have to figure out the things that are going to work for you guys, right? That's at the end of the day, that's what matters. Because, like, what I always say, right, is like, that person giving you advice is not at your house at 3 a.m. dealing with your kid, right? And so it has to work for you guys. Have you been able to do anything with that guilt, Adam?
I've been able to, starting January of 2023, I'm starting on the day shift. So as I've got closer to the shift's ending, it's sort of dissipated, because I'm letting go of what's in the past, because the past is the past. In this situation, nothing bad really happened. There's no trauma that I'm holding on to. It's just looking forward to the future. I know that if we do encounter situations again, I'm going to be there, because we're all going to be busy at the same time. We're all going to be sleeping every night under the same roof. If there's sleep disruptions, if there's something that's going on, I'm going to be here.
You get to join in.
I'm part of the party now.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got my invitation. Got my invitation.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit in that, like, he does and did get himself involved in, like, even coaching. Eric did soccer this summer, which I still think is outrageous because he was 3. But Adam coached. Adam would, finish work early on a couple days he could. He'd hustle home, pick him up, go take him coaching. And then he was responsible for bedtime that night because I wasn't dealing with a overtired toddler who I thought was too young to be doing soccer. That was his decision.
Right.
So he was going to be the one handling it. So he's poured himself into as much of the toddlerhood as he could, again, because it's where I wouldn't necessarily for sure call it a strength. It's a learning strength. You are definitely better at it than the baby part, but he finds ways to get himself involved.
Right. And let's just normalize that. I mean, unless, I don't know, you have loads of money in the bank, we got to pay the bills somehow.
Exactly.
Right. So it's not like, I totally understand. Right. Like, and hearing other people express that of like the person going to work while the other person was home on parental leave, there's like that feeling of missing out, feeling of guilt, like I'm not home and what's going on and what are they doing? And also you're contributing financially, which is important, right? Like we got to pay the bills.
Yeah. I think more of what you were trying to say though, is like, because when he was doing shifts, like he was up before he was gone before the twins were up,
right.
And the twins were in bed before he got home.
Yeah.
So in his 4 days of work, he wouldn't see them for 2.5 days.
Right.
And then it would happen again.
Yeah.
2.5 days. So like he was literally missing seeing his children.
Yeah.
Which is not fun.
No. And during COVID, when I was working at home, because like I said, we were home for 9 or 10 months in a row.
Yeah.
I was able to see Eric every single day, even if I was working for the 12-hour shift. I was able to come upstairs and physically see him on my lunch, hour and a half lunch, or lunch break or snack break.
Yeah.
But that wasn't possible once I was put back in the office.
Right.
So, and that's what occurred with the twins, was I was back in the office. So that luxury I had during COVID, which one of the very few luxuries that anyone can say was the case, that was a luxury I had, was being able to see Eric during that time period, whereas otherwise I wouldn't have been able to if COVID wasn't happening. We didn't have a pandemic. So that was also another guilty thing I felt about, is not having that opportunity to do with the twins what I did with Eric, being there on those days when I was working and having any contact with them whatsoever.
But we both need to make sure that we're not doing that to ourselves, because none of our kids will ever experience the same thing.
No.
Regardless, because the twins will never have the only child that Eric did. Right. Eric will never get, the fact that they have built-in like best friends. Like there's all these layers too. Like I remember watching something where I believe it was a psychologist, kind of talked about how children can vary so much in one family because no one child has the actual same parent. So you might biologically be the same, but that middle child is the only person who has experienced life with an older sibling and tired parents because they are exhausted from the first. Yeah. Whereas the only child had undivided attention. Right. Like the experiences aren't comparable no matter what you want to do. So you need to give yourself a break on that one.
It's not something that's taking up a lot of space in my mind right now.
That's good.
It's just a thought that passed through at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. And Adam, also just, again, to normalize, like that's also a really common feeling for a lot of parents. Like, I remember thinking like, how do I love a second kid? And then like, I had a second kid, and I will say like, not at first, like when I first delivered, I wasn't like, oh my God. It took a little while, but then when it kicked in, I was like, holy shit, my heart's going to explode. Like, and then I had a third and I was like, oh my God, like, how does that happen? Like, how do you love 3 kids, And yeah, there's like those concerns and fears of like, well, what's the third kid? I don't even have pictures of him. Like, what's your name? Like, I don't even.
We can at least say we've got a lot of pictures of our second and third. Can't always tell who's who.
Right.
But we've got a lot of pictures.
Right. Absolutely. So what continues to be the impact today on both of you from your experience of coming into parenthood the way you did?
That's a doozy.
I'll start.
Please do.
Okay, so I look at every day as like a blessing that we're able to have 2 successful IVFs. Even when the kids are a little difficult, if they're not, cooperating or getting ready as quickly as we'd like, or having to buckle themselves into their seatbelt in the van, having to open and close doors without us helping them, having to do everything themselves as much as they can with supervision, of course. It takes a lot for me to get very upset with the kids, just based on the path we took to parenthood. And I'm thankful every day for the opportunity, as it very easily wouldn't have been possible for us to have kids had we been born 200 years earlier, even 100 years earlier, before the science caught up to the requirement that it took for us as a couple to have children.
Yeah.
And I don't get angry very quickly either with anything, really, but especially with the kids. Like I said, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be their dad. And I wake up every morning saying, what are we going to do today? Because if I didn't have any kids, that's completely my decision. But now that I have 3 little bodies pulling me in different directions, sometimes the path isn't apparent to me in the morning. It's wherever they lead me. I'm not really in control of my schedule anymore. It's
much of anything.
I'm diving deep into diving deep into whatever they want to do, whatever they need me for. That's the path I'm on, and I look forward to it. It makes everything exciting.
Good. I love your attitude. I wish I had that attitude a little more in my day-to-day. I'm going to try to bring Adam's optimism and positivity maybe into my life.
Maybe once they're teenagers, I'll have a different change of heart or something when they're talking back to me and not maybe going astray.
You mean the 1-year-old saying no is not talking back to you?
Yeah, at least I know where he is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would say similar. Like I'm a little bit in awe of where we are. Every now and again, I just keep saying, holy shit, because there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it is the coolest fucking thing in the world to see. Eric knows more consistently than most who's who, how one day Aiden and Jake are hugging one another and then they're beating the crap out of one another over something that we have 2 of. And it's just, every day is a little bit of a, what the hell am I doing? And, oh, that's so cute. And I like my job. I definitely cannot see myself staying home with them all the time. I need a break from my own kids, but damn, am I ever happy they're here.
I want to thank you both for sharing with me, for being so open and vulnerable and authentic. And I truly appreciate that, because there's so much of your story. Like you say, it is unique, right? And there are going to be people listening who have, had twins or fertility treatments or a NICU stay or all of the above or some of the above. And they're going to be able to relate and like, oh, wow, like me too, and them too. And I'm not alone and I'm not the only one. And like normalizing these really difficult experiences, right? And how they change us in big, big ways, right?
Yeah, I think that's why because it was one of my sister's friends who sent me the post that led to this.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it was you that I immediately got in touch with. It was someone else who sent me to you. And the fact that someone even who's not even like close to me had seen the post and thought of what we went through. Yeah. And then I actually did something about it, because I do think that the only way for people to learn how to help themselves is to know that they're not the only ones doing it. And I think that's part of the main reason why I've been very open about a lot of this, maybe not always to the enjoyment of anyone on my social media that has now seen a pile of twin pictures because it was International Twin Day and then it was Prematurity Awareness Day and all of those things in a row. And is it your kid's birthday today? Nope, not yet. Wait till we get to those posts.
Exactly.
But yeah, it needs to be talked about. Everything needs more
talking. And I'm so thankful that you reached out to me and that we got connected. So thank you both.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us a platform for our story.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.